China has crushing tariffs right now on Canadian canola, while Canada has 100% tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles. Now, a group of Canadian experts argues for a new strategy on relations with China. Let's go to Perrin Beatty, former federal minister and co-chair of the expert group on Canada-U.S. relations. Thanks for joining us today.
Glad to be with you.
You suggest Canada create its own trade relationship with China, aside from U.S. involvement. But how does Ottawa walk that fine line without drawing anger from the U.S.?
Not easily. And I think we have to acknowledge that at the front end, because increasingly we're seeing Canada being squeezed between the dragon in China on one hand and the eagle in Washington on the other, with them demanding that we be all in with one side or the other. It's important for both Canadian sovereignty and for our economic security as well that we have the flexibility to be able to deal with both. There's no doubt that our closest relationship will continue throughout all of my lifetime to be with the United States, both in terms of security and in terms of economics. But China is simply too large and too important for Canada to pretend that it isn't there.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about that. We do import a lot of machinery and electronics from China. Would you say we are reliant on China in these sectors?
In specific areas, we're reliant on China. But I think the point we're trying to make is there's a potential for Canada in terms of our exports to significantly improve what we're passing on to China and creating jobs here in Canada, generating tax revenues and growth here. But we have to do it with our eyes open. I think one of the problems we've had in the past has been the assumption that somehow China was liberalizing. It's not. And it is not going to liberalize as a result of any sort of trade negotiations with Canada. So we have to look at this as something where we will engage where it's in Canada's interest to do so, and we will have protections in place to ensure that our essential interests are looked after.
It used to be, and you will remember, that trade with China or any interaction with China was spurned because of the country's human rights record. Has it now put itself in a position where it's impossible to do global trade without them?
It's just simply because of their size, their importance in the global economy. But in any case, even back, if you go back to the 1960s, when China was being isolated by the rest of the world, Canada sold wheat to China. And we have commodities such as potash, such as canola and other commodities that there's a real market for in China, where it's in our interest to sell them, and where it's beneficial potentially to China as well. Additionally, it makes sense for us to collaborate in areas where we have common interests. It may be in terms of environmental protection, for example, or fighting pandemics. And it doesn't make sense to say we aren't going to talk or we aren't going to engage, but we need to do so with our eyes open, and we need to do so with Canada's interests first and foremost in our concerns.
When you see things like the new allegation against Canada that China has launched at the World Trade Organization, in this case, and they've done this before, in this case, I'm wondering whether you see it as more of a negotiating tactic on China from China's end, or, why go that route when it seems to be a tit-for-tat show on the trade front between Ottawa and Beijing?
Well, and this has been the problem. We've got to get beyond that. There's no question that China, whether with Canada or with other countries, Australia, many others, have weaponized trade. And they use trade for political purposes to try to pressure countries to change their policies. That's utterly unacceptable. But simply tit for tat or simply trying to exclude China, we damage ourselves in the process as well. So we need to look at ways in which we can move beyond simply lobbing grenades at each other and look at specific areas where it makes sense for us to collaborate. Not across the board, not with our defenses down in terms of political interference within Canada by the government of China, or political retaliation using trade as a weapon, but looking at specific areas where it's in Canada's interest to move ahead.
On the home front, you also mentioned doing a trilateral agreement so that there's monitoring. Can you explain what that looks like? I know you said Europe does it as well, what that would look like?
Well, one of the real and legitimate concerns the United States has is, first of all, about trade diversion, that we would be getting trade coming through products coming through Canada destined for the United States from China, or that we could find that there was dumping taking place. It's important for us, if we want to maintain free trade within North America, that the three countries of North America work together to make sure that the rules that we have can't be circumvented by somebody coming in through the back door.
Let me ask you, with the pivots we have seen out of the U.S., not to exclude the U.S., but would China, you say or believe, be a more reliable trading partner in the future for Canada than the U.S.?
But I wouldn't call them more reliable than the U.S. The difficulty we have is that both of them are unreliable at the present time. We have an administration in Washington which is closing down its markets to Canadian goods and services. And of course, we have China, which is weaponized trade as well. What we need to do is to diversify our trade. We need to make sure that we don't have all of our eggs in one basket, but we need to continue trading with other countries.
All right, Perrin, I'm going to leave it there. Appreciate you joining us on this. Perrin Beatty is a former federal minister, co-chair of that expert group on Canada-U.S. relations.